listen, my whole mission now is like, I mean, it's so connected to what you just said, because it's about redefining success in a way that celebrates humanity and well-being and soul. And like the humanity and the soul is all the stuff, and frankly, the well-being, because it's about mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. It's everything you and I are talking about leading up to this point is all in what I believe. And I want to see that carried through in a bigger way, especially how we define success in this world and especially in this country.
You know what? It's funny, that theme of what defines success and people wanting to rewrite it. I've had career coaches, I've had burnout experts on this show, and these are all things that have like organically started coming up really in probably the last 6 months or so. And I think you're spot on with that. I want to get into more of that and like what your mission
What
is and
brought
stuff.
me there?
Right. Like let's do the nonlinear storytelling part of it now.
I love it.
I want to go back to, you've been incredibly successful as a marketer, and then you ended up, and I remember you saying this was the coolest job, being the CMO of Harley Davidson, and you were riding around the country on motorcycles. Correct me if I'm misremembering.
The world of motorcycles.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden that wasn't working for you anymore. So how did you end up at Harley Davidson? And then how did this start to change for you to where you finally pulled the plug and were like, this isn't for me?
Yeah, so I was going around the world working mostly like on the advertising and media agency side of the whole of the advertising and marketing business. Then I did my stint at AOL. Then I went back into media, big global jobs within Omnicom Media Group. I mean, literally, I could have ridden into the sunset doing that work. I worked on such cool brands, the ones I was telling you before. And then I got a call from a guy who was a dear friend of mine. We had started our careers together back at DDB in Chicago, to take us back to the beginning of the conversation. He had remained a dear friend. He was a huge motorcycle rider, and he had gone to Harley as their very first chief marketing officer. They had finally sort of formalized the role in the company. And he calls me, wants to have a conversation. We meet up here in Chicago, reconnect. And he basically said, I am trying to formalize this and gel a global marketing organization, like truly pull together the whole globe. And he said, I'm looking at your career. When I was thinking about what does this role look like and who could possibly come in and do this, I just kept coming back to you, because I look at all the brands that you've worked on. You've been around the world, you've done global marketing. And now I know you haven't done it on the brand, on the client side, but you can bring all that experience into Harley. And I'm like, yeah, I get all of that, but you're missing one big piece. I don't ride motorcycles. It's like, hello, that seems to be a really important piece to this whole thing. So anyway, he was like, actually, Shelley, I mean, I hadn't even worked in the automotive business. I'd probably touched every category except for automotive. Yeah. And, in power sports, right? Like the two that would be most relevant. And he was like, actually, I think that's a huge selling point, because by that point in time, they were beyond the turnaround. They brought in a new CEO who was really kind of bringing the company forward into a new era. And he was like, that's not what we need. We need fresh blood. We need fresh perspective. So the fact that you could come in with all this other industry perspective and this global marketing experience is what we're looking for. So I went through the whole process, interviewed all the way up to the CEO of Harley Davidson at the time. And it was fascinating because I was, of course, intrigued. Who's not intrigued when Harley Davidson comes calling? I mean, I even say in my keynote, I'm like, yes, the brand that people love so much that they tattoo it on their body.
Yes,
right?
For real.
And as a marketer, I mean, there's no greater honor than people ink your brand on their body. And that is a huge legacy to steward and to uphold and to have your fingerprints on as a marketer. And so I didn't take it lightly, but I really started to think, wow, if I was going to do this once in my career, go from the agency side to the client side, I could never imagine doing it at like a big consumer product goods company.
No, that'd be boring.
Well, also, or even McDonald's, who'd been my client forever. I was just like, that wouldn't work. My spirit is too rebellious. And I'm like, wait a second, rebellious spirit, finally, I was just like, oh my God, I can't resist this anymore. And I just come out of a fresh divorce. I was ready to reinvent myself, get my mojo and badassery back. So, I mean, you talk about like those inflection points in your life where you just go, all signs are pointing to this. And I was listening and I ended up saying yes. And I moved up to Milwaukee and I learned how to ride motorcycles. And because that was the other thing, is like, even though I didn't ride, they were like, you don't have to ride. We can't force people to ride.
Right.
I understood how deeply rooted in the culture of Harley and in the understanding of the brand riding was, because events that happen around the world, these big motorcycle rallies, like that's the fabric of what this brand is all about. So I knew I needed to be in that culture and be able to speak that language and to be able to relate to the customers, on the most
in a like real
level.
way instead of this
in a very
superficial
real way.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to ride a motorcycle. And
so I gotta ask, was that intriguing to you, like that piece of it where it's like, I'm gonna learn how to ride motorcycles and become part of this community, like, or was that like, oh shit, this is something I have to do, I'm not really excited about it? Or...
No, they said from the beginning, you don't have to do this. So I honestly, did I feel a little pressure? Yeah, of course I did. I'd be lying if I said I felt no pressure, because 95%, that's not an official stat, but I think it's probably damn close, at least at the time that I was there. 95% of the people in the Harley world rode motorcycles.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be a part, and I'm not talking about just customers. Of course, 100% of customers ride motorcycles, but like in, our even relating to our dealers, right? Harley dealers. Like I thought, how could I have an authentic conversation with this powerful dealer network? So anyway, I was excited because I was like, well, this is a badass thing to do. And Nick, I was 40 years old at the time. So I don't say that like I was old, but for the first time getting on a motorcycle, I was older. And so I was excited and terrified all at the same time.
I'm almost 40 or I turn 40 next year, and I would be terrified to get on a motorcycle.
It was, and you know what? I can't say that I became like the world's best motorcyclist. I didn't. And there were certain like big, powerful motorcycles that I would never ride. Like I get on the back of them. Like we did some cross countries and I was like, I'm not confident enough in my riding ability to do the cross country. So, but I would ride on a motorcycle. I would just get on the back to do like our ride to Sturgis. But I would do shorter rides. We rode across South Africa. We rode through Brazil. We rode up to the the Redeemer statue in Rio. Like I've ridden in Vietnam. I've ridden in India. I have ridden to Sturgis and back. I don't know how many times. So it was very cool. And some I was like riding, and some I was like, you know what? I'm a passenger on the back, and I'm okay with that. Like no shame in that game. So it was really cool. I was able to say yes, and I stepped all the way into it, and I did it in my way, in a way that felt safe for me, in a way that felt edgy enough, but still comfortable.
Right.
And I have no regrets that I did. It was fun. I owned my own motorcycle. How many people get to say that? That's
so cool. Do you still ride?
No, I don't. There's a whole different reason for that, which plays into my story. Well, let me just say this and then we can circle back, because I want to make sure that we bring people to what I started feeling at Harley and why I left. But so just to put a pin in that, something happened when I ended up leaving Harley and went on sabbatical that made me just pause on riding. And to be truthful, I just haven't gotten back to it. I still love Harley. I still love motorcycles, but that is not a part of my life right now. I didn't leave riding because I left Harley. So that's one point. So let me back up and answer your question. So I'm now at Harley. I didn't start as their CMO. I started as VP of global marketing, helping to create a truly global marketing organization, pulling all of the different regions together, really setting us on a more unified, like, global brand path than the company had ever been on, blah, blah, blah. One thing, comes to another. There was turnover, whatever. My boss ends up leaving the company, and somewhere down the line, I become chief marketing officer. And so
was there a moment for you there where you were just like, wow? Like, did you take a moment to be like, wow? That's all I can think of to say, because that was what my moment was when I was like, I've worked my whole career for this and I got it. And then there was also a lot of fear with that. So I'm just curious, because like you were at, still really young. Like there's not a lot of CMOs that are 40 years old.
Yeah,
like maybe...
so I was probably 43 or 44 when I became, I took on that responsibility. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a wow, and this is the perfect segue into, the beginning of the next chapter and what happened and why I'm not still at Harley today. So yeah, there was definitely oh my God. And I think it was so organic because from the time I set foot in Harley, I really loved the brand and I loved the experience. And like, I just went, this is a pun in every way, but like whole hog into it. Right. So I was just all in, and so I was in it, and I kept taking on more and more and more responsibility. So yeah, I think there was that moment where it was like, oh, wow, I'm suddenly doing this thing that I had dreamt of so many years ago when, like, my dad left Pillsbury and ultimately went to be the chairman and CEO of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Like, he had like worked for all of these incredible brands. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like what my dad used to always talk about. Like, I'm doing the thing.